Let me ask you something real. Do you ever feel like you're living inside a box that you didn't even build? A box with hard, sharp edges labeled, be strong, don't cry, provide, protect, don't show weakness, don't talk about feelings. If you're a man today, chances are you've felt that pressure. You've been told what a real man is supposed to look like, sound like, and act like. And if you step outside of that box, society has a way of reminding you real quick that you're doing it wrong. From childhood, so many of us are handed this script we didn't ask for. We're told to man up, to tough it out, to hide the tears, to bury the doubts, to push through the pain. And at first, maybe we wear that mask proudly. But over time, the mask gets heavy. And what no one tells you is that behind that mask, millions of men are carrying silent battles. Loneliness, depression, the weight of never feeling enough. Today, I want to challenge that script. I want to unpack the burdens of traditional masculinity and offer a new path forward. One that doesn't strip you of strength, but expands it. One that doesn't confine you, but liberates you. This is Beyond Alpha, a new path to masculinity and inner strength. To understand where we're going, we have to first understand where we are and where we came from. For decades, maybe even centuries, masculinity has been defined by a very rigid, very narrow set of rules. Let's call it the Alpha Blueprint. In this blueprint, a man is expected to be stoic, unemotional, financially successful, physically tough, and always in control. His value is measured by how much he can endure without complaint, how much he can provide without asking for help, and how much he can dominate his environment. Now, in small doses, some of these traits aren't inherently bad. Discipline, responsibility, resilience. These can all be powerful strengths. But the problem is, when masculinity is reduced to only those traits, and when it demands that we suppress the rest of our humanity, it becomes a prison. We've all heard the phrase, man up. Two little words that carry enormous weight. Think about the moments those words are usually spoken. A boy falls off his bike and scrapes his knee. He's crying because it hurts, but someone tells him, stop crying, man up. A teenager gets his heart broken for the first time, and his friends tell him, shake it off, man up. A grown man is struggling with job loss, financial pressure, or depression, but the cultural message he hears is, don't talk about it, man up. What's the lesson behind those words? The lesson is, pain is weakness, vulnerability is shameful, feelings are feminine, and if you want to be a real man, you have to shut all of that down. At first, maybe we obey because we want to fit in, but over time, those unspoken rules turn life into a pressure cooker. You can only bottle things up for so long before they explode, or worse, before they eat you alive in silence. Now let's talk about Stoicism. The ancient philosophy actually has incredible wisdom about resilience, self-discipline, and focusing on what we can control. But somewhere along the way, Stoicism got twisted into something it was never meant to be. It became an excuse for emotional suppression. Instead of resilience, it became rigidity. Instead of wisdom, it became silence. The message became, don't feel, don't cry, don't talk, just endure. And let me tell you, endurance without expression isn't strength. It's isolation. It's standing in a crowded room and feeling completely alone because you don't believe you're allowed to be real. When men buy into this blueprint, they cut themselves off not only from others, but from themselves. They lose the ability to process their own emotions. They numb themselves just to survive. And numbing doesn't just dull the pain, it dulls the joy too. We've all heard the phrase, man up. Two little words that carry enormous weight. Think about the moments those words are usually spoken. A boy falls off his bike and scrapes his knee. He's crying because it hurts, but someone tells him, stop crying, man up. A teenager gets his heart broken for the first time, and his friends tell him, shake it off, man up. A grown man is struggling with job loss, financial pressure, or depression, but the cultural message he hears is, don't talk about it, man up. What's the lesson behind those words? The lesson is, pain is weakness, vulnerability is shameful, feelings are feminine, and if you want to be a real man, you have to shut all of that down. At first, maybe we obey because we want to fit in, but over time, those unspoken rules turn life into a pressure cooker. You can only bottle things up for so long before they explode, or worse, before they eat you alive in silence. Now let's talk about Stoicism. The ancient philosophy actually has incredible wisdom about resilience, self-discipline, and focusing on what we can control. But somewhere along the way, Stoicism got twisted into something it was never meant to be. It became an excuse for emotional suppression. Instead of resilience, it became rigidity. Instead of wisdom, it became silence. The message became, don't feel, don't cry, don't talk, just endure. And let me tell you, endurance without expression isn't strength. It's isolation. It's standing in a crowded room and feeling completely alone because you don't believe you're allowed to be real. When men buy into this blueprint, they cut themselves off not only from others, but from themselves. They lose the ability to process their own emotions. They numb themselves just to survive. And numbing doesn't just dull the pain, it dulls the joy too. This brings us to the crisis we're facing right now in 2025. Because this isn't just theory, it's reality. Across the world, men are struggling at alarming rates. Men are less likely than women to seek therapy or open up about their struggles. Suicide rates are significantly higher among men, especially middle-aged men who feel crushed by financial pressure, social isolation, or unprocessed grief. Substance abuse, addiction, and reckless behaviors often become the coping mechanisms for pain that was never given a safe outlet. Pause a moment. And yet society still whispers the same tired phrase, man up. But here's the truth, it's killing us. The old model of masculinity isn't just outdated, it's dangerous. So if the old blueprint is crumbling, what comes next? Do we throw away masculinity altogether? Or do we redefine it into something broader, deeper, and more human? That's what we'll explore next. The spectrum of strength, and why vulnerability might be the missing piece we've been searching for. Beyond Alpha Part 2, the spectrum of strength. So, we've seen how the old script of masculinity, stoicism, suppression, domination, has left so many men feeling trapped. The question is, if that blueprint is breaking down, what replaces it? Does strength disappear? Or do we need to redefine what strength really is? Pause for a moment. The truth is, strength has always been much bigger than we've been told. Strength is not one-dimensional. It's not just about muscle, grit, or keeping your emotions locked in a cage. Real strength exists on a spectrum, and the most powerful men I know aren't the ones who hide their hearts. They're the ones who embrace them. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's a hidden superpower. Let's start with one of the most misunderstood concepts, vulnerability. In our culture, vulnerability is often painted as weakness, as fragility, as something to be avoided at all costs. But think about what vulnerability really is. It's the willingness to show up without guarantees. It's the courage to open your heart, to admit uncertainty, to let yourself be seen. When you tell your partner, I'm scared I might fail at this job, that's vulnerability. When you admit to your best friend, I feel lonely and I don't know how to fix it, that's vulnerability. When you stand in front of a group of people and share a story that makes your voice shake, that's vulnerability. And let me ask you, does that sound weak? Or does that sound brave? Let's pause, because here's the paradox. What we've been told is weakness is actually one of the purest forms of strength. It takes guts to strip away the armor and show people who you really are. It takes courage to risk rejection, to face judgment, and to keep standing anyway. Vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. Vulnerability is strength. Stories of men who thrived by being open. I want to share a few examples because this isn't just theory, it's lived reality. Professional athletes. In recent years, we've seen NFL players, NBA stars, and Olympians open up about struggles with depression and anxiety. Instead of diminishing their reputations, it made them more human and more inspiring. Fans didn't see weakness, they saw courage. Artists and creators. From musicians to actors, some of the most powerful art in the world has come from men willing to pour their emotions into their craft. Think about it. The songs that move us to tears, the films that inspire us, the books that make us feel understood. They come from men who weren't afraid to be vulnerable. Everyday men. A father telling his kids, "I don't have all the answers, but I love you." A friend saying, "I've been struggling, can we talk?" These aren't headlines, but they're life-changing moments. Vulnerability creates connection, and connection is what saves us. Emotional intelligence, the new superpower. If vulnerability is the doorway, then emotional intelligence is the muscle we build once we walk through it. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions while also empathizing with others. Studies consistently show that emotional intelligence is a stronger predictor of success in relationships and careers than IQ or technical skills. Why? Because life isn't just about solving problems, it's about connecting with people. In the workplace, leaders who have emotional intelligence inspire trust, loyalty, and innovation. They're not just bosses, they're mentors. In relationships, men who practice emotional intelligence create deeper intimacy and stronger bonds. They don't just listen to respond, they listen to understand. Pause. So when someone tells you emotions are a liability, remember, emotions are data. They're signals that guide us, connect us, and fuel our growth. Ignoring them doesn't make you stronger, it makes you blind. Mastering them, that makes you unstoppable. Redefining courage, beyond physical might. Now let's talk about courage. For too long, courage has been defined as physical bravery, running into battle, lifting the heaviest weights, taking the biggest risks. And yes, there's real courage in those moments. But let's broaden the definition. Courage is telling the truth even when it's unpopular. Courage is standing up for someone who doesn't have a voice, even if it costs you socially. Courage is choosing integrity over approval, compassion over cruelty, authenticity over conformity. Some of the bravest men in history weren't warriors, they were peacemakers. They were leaders who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. They were fathers who broke cycles of abuse by choosing love over violence. They were friends who intervened when someone was on the edge. Pause. Physical might fades with age, but moral conviction, that's timeless. That's the kind of courage the world needs now more than ever. Bringing it all together. So, let's connect the dots. Vulnerability teaches us to be real. Emotional intelligence teaches us to connect. Courage teaches us to act with integrity. Together, they form a spectrum of strength that is far more powerful than the outdated alpha stereotype. Because true strength isn't about domination, it's about liberation. It's about freeing yourself to be fully human. And here's the beautiful part. When you expand your definition of strength, you don't lose the old traits like discipline or resilience. You enhance them. You become stronger not just on the outside, but on the inside. And that's what this new masculinity is all about. Now, theory is great, but what does this look like in the real world? How are men today actually living this out? In the next section, we're going to look at modern examples of masculinity in action, from fatherhood to empathy to advocacy. Because redefining masculinity isn't just an idea, it's a movement already happening all around us. Beyond Alpha, Part 3, Masculinity in Action. Masculinity in Action, Modern Examples. So far, we've broken down the cracks in traditional masculinity and explored the spectrum of strength, vulnerability, emotional intelligence, courage. But let's bring it down to earth. What does this actually look like in everyday life? What does the new path of masculinity look like when it's lived out in action, not just talked about? Pause. The truth is, this shift isn't just happening in theory, it's happening all around us. From fathers to athletes to everyday men making different choices, we're seeing masculinity being rewritten in real time. Empathy as a cornerstone. Let's start with empathy. For generations, empathy has been painted as something soft, something feminine, something that supposedly doesn't belong in a man's toolkit. But empathy, real, active empathy, is one of the most powerful tools a man can carry. Think about it. Empathy is what allows us to step into someone else's shoes, to understand their perspective, to truly listen. And when men bring empathy into their relationships, everything changes. A husband who listens deeply to his partner doesn't just avoid conflict, he builds trust. A father who listens to his child's fears doesn't just comfort them, He teaches them emotional safety. A leader who listens to his team doesn't just manage people, he inspires them. Pause. One of the strongest men I know once told me, "The moment I stopped trying to always have the answers and started really listening, that's when my relationships transformed." Empathy doesn't make you weak, it makes you magnetic. It makes you trusted. And in a world full of noise, the ability to listen is revolutionary. Fatherhood reimagined. Now let's talk about fatherhood. For centuries, the father figure was defined as the distant provider, the man who worked, who disciplined, who rarely showed affection, the emotional labor, the nurturing, the softness. That was left to mothers. But today, that script is changing. More men are embracing paternity leave, spending those critical early months bonding with their newborns. They're changing diapers, rocking babies to sleep, showing up not as part-time caregivers, but as fully engaged parents. This isn't just nice, it's revolutionary. Research shows that children who grow up with emotionally present fathers have higher self-esteem, better academic performance, and healthier relationships later in life. And here's the kicker. Fathers who embrace this role also benefit. They report deeper bonds, more joy, and a stronger sense of purpose. Being a hands-on dad doesn't diminish masculinity, it enriches it. Imagine a generation of boys growing up seeing their fathers not just as providers, but as nurturers, listeners, role models of emotional intelligence. That's how we break the cycle. That's how we create men who don't have to unlearn decades of emotional suppression, because they never learned it in the first place. Shared roles and equality. But fatherhood is just one example of a bigger shift, the rebalancing of roles. For too long, men were told their worth was tied only to how much money they brought home or how much physical labor they could provide. But today, masculinity is expanding to include equality at home, at work, and in society. Men are stepping into shared household responsibilities, not because they're forced to, but because partnership means partnership. Men are advocating for equal pay, not as a threat to their own success, but as a commitment to fairness. Men are standing beside women in the fight against harassment, abuse, and systemic inequality, not as saviors, but as allies. And let's be honest, it's not always comfortable. It challenges ego, it challenges old conditioning. But that's what growth is. Growth isn't comfortable. Growth asks us to stretch. And when men choose equality, they don't lose power. They help create a world where power is shared, respected, and multiplied. Advocacy and allyship. Now, let's expand the lens even further. Masculinity in action also means using strength and privilege for advocacy. It means standing up for voices that are often ignored or silenced, because the truth is, real strength doesn't just protect itself, it protects others. We're seeing more men speak out against toxic behaviors in locker rooms, workplaces, and social circles. They're not laughing at sexist jokes, they're calling them out. We're seeing men advocate for LGBTQ+ rights, not because it directly benefits them, but because justice matters. We're seeing men use their platforms, whether it's a social media account, a classroom, or a boardroom, to elevate voices that have been historically pushed to the margins. And here's the beautiful part. Advocacy doesn't strip away masculinity, it expands it. Because what could be more masculine than courageously standing for what is right, even when it costs you something? Case studies, masculinity in real life. Let's ground this with some stories, because real change isn't just about big movements. It's about individuals making different choices. The coach, a high school football coach in Texas, made headlines for changing his team's culture. Instead of shaming players for crying after a loss, he encouraged them to talk about disappointment, to support each other, to process their emotions. The result? A team that was not only tougher on the field but tighter off the field. Their bond became their strength. The CEO, a tech leader in Silicon Valley, chose to take paternity leave publicly, encouraging his entire company to normalize it. When he came back, employee satisfaction, and especially retention among new parents, skyrocketed. His decision didn't make him less of a leader, it made him a better one. The friend. A man noticed his buddy withdrawing, canceling plans, and drinking more than usual. Instead of ignoring it, he reached out, I care about you. What's going on? That simple act of empathy led his friend to finally open up about depression. One conversation, one moment of courage, may have saved a life. These stories matter because they remind us masculinity isn't abstract. It's not a debate on a podcast or a meme on social media. It's lived out every single day in the choices men make. And those choices ripple outward into families, communities, and culture itself, bringing it together. So, what does masculinity in action look like? It looks like empathy. It looks like engaged fatherhood. It looks like shared responsibility and active allyship. It looks like men stepping into a bigger definition of strength. Not just protecting themselves, but protecting others. Not just standing tall, but kneeling to listen. Not just enduring silently, but speaking boldly. Pause. The world doesn't need more men stuck in outdated scripts. The world needs men willing to write new ones. And every time you choose empathy over ego, presence over distance, advocacy over silence, you're proving that this new masculinity isn't just possible, it's already here. But here's the thing. It's one thing to look at examples out there. It's another to bring it home. The real question is, how do you live this out? How do you break free from the shoulds and start cultivating your authentic self? That's what we'll dive into next. Beyond Alpha, Part 4, Cultivating Your Authentic Self. Cultivating your authentic self. We've talked about the cracks in traditional masculinity. We've explored the spectrum of strength. We've looked at real-world examples of men rewriting the script. But now comes the hardest and most important part, turning the lens inward. Because it's one thing to see the change out there. It's another to ask, how do I live this out? How do I become the man I was actually meant to be? Pause. The answer lies in cultivating your authentic self, not the version of you society expects, not the version your parents scripted, not the mask you wear to survive. The authentic self. The man who exists when all the noise is stripped away. That's where freedom lives. That's where real strength is born. Breaking free from the shoulds. From the time we're kids, we're handed a list of shoulds. You should be tough. You should be successful. You should never cry. You should like these things, hate those things, pursue this career, avoid that hobby. And without realizing it, we start living someone else's script. Maybe you chose a job you hate because it looked impressive. Maybe you buried a passion because it didn't seem manly enough. Maybe you silenced your true self because you were afraid of rejection. But here's the truth. The shoulds will suffocate you. They will drain the life out of you. And the only way forward is to start asking different questions. Pause, take that in. Instead of, what should I do? Ask, what do I value? What do I love? What matters to me? Not because someone told me it should, but because it lights something inside of me. Practical exercise, the values inventory. Here's a simple but powerful exercise you can do tonight. Take a blank sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, write the shoulds. List all the things you felt pressured to be, do, or want. On the other side, write what I truly value. Be honest. Maybe you realize you don't actually care about making six figures. You care about freedom. Maybe you don't care about having a flashy car. You care about meaningful experiences. Maybe you don't care about being seen as tough. You care about being kind. Once you've got your list, circle 3 values that matter most to you. Those 3? That's your compass. That's the beginning of your authentic masculinity. Self-care isn't selfish. Now let's talk about something men are rarely taught, self-care. For so long, men have been conditioned to sacrifice themselves for work, family, society. We glorify burnout as dedication, exhaustion as honor, silence as strength. But here's the reality. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you're running on fumes, your relationships suffer. If you ignore your health, your strength crumbles. If you neglect your mind, you become a prisoner of stress and anger. Self-care isn't selfish, it's sustainable strength. It's saying, I value myself enough to rest. I value my body enough to fuel it. I value my mind enough to care for it. Pause. Take that in. Think of it like this. A warrior sharpens his sword before battle. A man who practices self-care is sharpening his soul for life. That's not weakness, That's wisdom. Practical self-care habits for men. And self-care doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. It's the daily habits that compound over time. Move your body, not just to look good, but to feel strong and clear. Fuel yourself with real food, not just fast fixes. Get sleep. Not 3 hours, not 5. Real, restorative sleep. Meditate or journal to process the noise inside your head. Spend time in nature, because nothing recalibrates the soul like fresh air and silence. Talk. Whether it's a friend, a mentor, or a therapist, speaking your truth out loud is one of the most powerful acts of self-care. These aren't luxuries, they're necessities, and the more you care for yourself, the more powerful you become for others. Case study: authenticity in action. Let me share a story that stuck with me. A man I met in his 40s told me how, for most of his life, he lived in the shadow of the shoulds. He pursued a career he hated because it paid well. He married young because he thought he was supposed to. He never spoke about his struggles because he believed men weren't allowed to. By 35, he was burned out, bitter, and disconnected from everyone around him. But then, one day, he cracked. He sat in his car outside of work, unable to go inside, tears streaming down his face. And in that moment he realized, the life he was living wasn't his, it was a mask. He decided that day to change. He left the job he hated and started one aligned with his passions. He began therapy and, for the first time, talked about the pain he'd carried since childhood. He rebuilt his relationship with his kids by being present, vulnerable, and engaged. And here's what he told me. For the first time in my life, I feel like myself. And that's worth everything. That's the power of authenticity. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming who you've always been underneath the layers of conditioning. So, cultivating your authentic self means breaking free from the shoulds, prioritizing self-care, and embracing the power of choice. It's about stripping away the mask and finally letting the real you breathe. And when you do, you discover a masculinity that isn't fragile, isn't rigid, and isn't borrowed. It's yours, fully, unapologetically yours. But authenticity doesn't exist in isolation. It thrives in community. So in the next section, we're going to look at how redefining masculinity isn't just personal, it's collective. How fostering open conversations, mentoring the next generation, and building a more compassionate society benefits not just men, but everyone. That's where this movement really takes root. Beyond Alpha, Part 5, Building a Better Tomorrow. Building a better tomorrow. Up to now, we've focused on the personal journey, breaking free from outdated scripts, embracing vulnerability, cultivating authenticity. But masculinity doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not just personal, it's collective. The way we as men redefine ourselves ripples outward into families, friendships, workplaces, and society as a whole. If we want a better tomorrow, it starts with men making better choices today. Choices that don't just heal us individually, but lift the people around us. Let's talk about what that looks like. Fostering open conversations. First, we need to create spaces where men can actually talk. For too long, men's conversations have been limited to sports, work, surface-level banter. And don't get me wrong, I love a good game day debate. But if that's the ceiling of our connection, we're starving ourselves of something deeper. Imagine circles of men where it's normal to say, I've been struggling with anxiety. Where it's normal to say, I miss my dad. I never got to tell him I loved him. Where it's normal to admit, I'm proud of myself. I actually feel good. When men open up, the weight lifts. When men talk, stigma cracks. And every honest conversation we have is one less man carrying his burden alone. Mentorship for the next generation. The second piece is mentorship. Because if we don't pass on a healthier model of masculinity, the next generation will inherit the same broken one we did. Mentorship doesn't have to mean formal programs. It means showing up. It means fathers being emotionally present for their sons and daughters. It means uncles, coaches, teachers modeling authenticity instead of performance. It means older men telling younger men, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be yourself. It means guiding boys not into a rigid box, but into a wide open field where they can explore who they are without shame. Because the truth is, boys don't just learn from what we tell them. They learn from what we show them. If they see us numb, they'll learn to numb. If they see us real, they'll learn to be real. And that's how cycles change. The collective benefit. And here's the big picture. When men redefine masculinity, it doesn't just benefit men, it benefits everyone. Women benefit because they no longer have to carry the full weight of emotional labor alone. They gain partners who listen, who share, who stand beside them as equals. Children benefit because they grow up with fathers who are present, loving, and emotionally intelligent. Communities benefit because men who know how to process emotions are less likely to resort to violence, abuse, or destructive behavior. Workplaces benefit because leaders with empathy and emotional intelligence create cultures of trust and innovation. The ripple effect is massive. When men heal, society heals. When men expand, humanity expands. The vision forward. So picture it, a world where boys grow up unafraid of their feelings, where men support each other not through silence and competition, but through openness and solidarity, where masculinity isn't a box, but a spectrum. Wide, diverse, authentic. That's the future we can build. That's the better tomorrow waiting for us. The old script is crumbling, and yes, that can feel scary. But it's also an opportunity, a chance to write something better. Because beyond the outdated alpha stereotype lies a new path to masculinity. One built on courage, empathy, authenticity, and inner strength. If you've ever felt trapped by society's definition of what it means to be a man, hear me clearly. You don't have to play that role anymore. You can write your own. You can reclaim your strength, not by hiding who you are, but by embracing it. And here's the thing. This movement doesn't grow unless we grow it together. So if this message resonated with you, share it with a friend who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and follow. It really helps us grow, and it keeps this conversation alive. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and remember, masculinity is yours to define. Beyond Alpha, a new path to masculinity and inner strength.